before I go over which races synergize quite well with which classes, I do want to say that any race can go with any class. There's no strict limit. You don't have to pick the choices I'm outlining here. This is just my own personal opinion on what races work well with what classes. I'm going to go through each of the sub-races, and so there are about 19 of them, although 2 of them are almost exactly the same. And this will also act kind of as like a mini sort of guide for the races. Alright, so starting with the High Elf, what the High Elves get, we get Dexterity +2, Keen Senses, which is proficiency in Perception, and then proficiency in these weapons here, Longsword, Short Sword, Longbow, and Shortbow. Dark Vision, which is nice, Fey Ancestry, which means you have advantage on saving throws against being charmed, Magic can't put you to sleep, and as the High Elf sub-race, we get Intelligence +1 and a cantrip. The attack roll for the cantrips, or the saving throws for the cantrips, will be based off Intelligence, just like a wizard. So High Elves, I think, work well for Barbs, Fighters, and Paladins if they're going to be Dexterity based. If they're not, I probably wouldn't pick a High Elf. Without that Dexterity sort of stipulation, I would definitely go for Rangers, Rogues, and or Wizards, because we get the bonus to Dexterity. The Intelligence only really helps with Wizards. And as for the cantrip, if you're not being a wizard, I would say don't pick an attacking cantrip. You can get the Warped Headband of Intellect to get your Intelligence up to 17, so then you've got a good attacking stat. But then, you know, if you're a rogue, for example, you can't use Sneak Attack with Firebolt, so it's not really worth taking an attacking cantrip. Which then leaves utility cantrips. Blade Ward I probably wouldn't pick often. It's sometimes okay as a backup for fighters and barbarians if they're not raging, if you have nothing else to do with your turn. You can get the light cantrips. High Elves themselves don't need it. It would have to be using with someone else, so that kind of leaves you with friends, which can be okay. Mage Hands, I suppose if you're not concentrating on anything else, maybe. Mind of Illusion is probably the one I would go for, because you can group up enemies together ahead of combat. Moving on to the Wood Elf. So we get the same race features as the High Elf, but we also, or kind of instead, we get a movement speed of 35 feet. This is the only race that gets this higher movement speed. This can't be overstated, really. Just being able to get into the right position is really, really helpful. And when you dash, you get an extra 10 feet of movement speed effectively in that turn. Stealth, proficiency, and Wisdom +1. So this Wisdom then means we have almost everything we had for the High Elf. So we've got the Bard, Fighter, and Paladin, if you're going Dexterity based. But we also, and Ranger, sorry, and Rogue. But we also get the good possibilities of the Cleric and Druid on top, because they are Wisdom based casters. And also with those 2 classes in particular, the Cleric and Druid, we then get proficiency with the Longsword, Short Sword, Longbow, and Shortbow, which they don't get. Now you're not always going to be attacking with those classes, but it's nice to have. Especially before level 5, your Longbow can do more damage than your cantrips. So in patch 9, it's very good to have these proficiencies. As you get higher and higher levels, the weapon proficiencies kind of matter less and less, I would say. Also, I just want to point out that we can, with a Wood Elf Ranger, that one and this one, we can have proficiency in 9 different skills at character creation. Fairly good, I would say. Right, moving on to Tieflings. Starting with the Asmodeus Tiefling, so we get resistance to fire magic for all Tieflings, and they all get Dark Vision. It's kind of nice, fire magic is fairly common, and Dark Vision is always useful. The movement speed of all Tieflings is 30 feet, and we get Intelligence +1, Charisma +2, and Thaumaturgy at character creation. At level 3, we get Hellish Rebuke, and level 5 we get Darkness. So this Intelligence means that a Wizard can be a good class to pick, and the Charisma means we can then also choose Bards, Sorcerers, Warlocks, maybe Paladins. Charisma is important for Paladins, but without any Dexterity or Strength, it does mean our weapon attacks aren't going to be as good. Mephistopheles Tieflings, the same stats actually, apart from the only thing different are the spells. So Mephistopheles Tieflings get Mage Hand at level 1, and Burning Hands at level 3, and Flame Blade at level 5. That Flame Blade at level 5 kind of opens up the potential for some builds based around Flame Blades. I've had a few commenters actually talk about that, and I think I've seen it in Reddit as well. The only downside to that sort of build is that it's once per long rest. I know we can long rest as much as possible, but it might mean you're having to long rest after every single combat. I'm personally not a fan of doing that, but if you're happy doing that, actually it can work out quite well. Sariel Tiefling, get Charisma +2, but also Strength +1. And we get Thaumaturgy, which looks like the same as Asmodeus, But at level 3 instead, we get Searing Smite, and level 5 we get Branding Smite. So Zariel Tieflings actually work really well with Barbarians, Bards, Fighters, Paladins, Rangers. Ranger if you're going for a strength-based Ranger. Sorcerers and Warlocks, we get loads and loads of choices. Kind of a bit, sadly, these Smites don't necessarily synergize particularly well with... Well, Bards I suppose you could be a Valor Bard. They don't particularly synergize well with a Sorcerer or Warlock. They're not often melee classes. The Warlock can maybe deal with it, Sorcerer not so much. But it's nice to have these extra options, a couple of extra spells. Drow, there's actually no mechanical difference between the Lothsworn Drow and Seldarian Drow. You do get some slightly different dialogue options though. They do actually look a bit different as well. The Lothsworn Drow get red eyes, and here we have blue eyes for the Seldarian. Anyway, what do we get? So we get some of the stuff that elves get, so 30 feet movement speeds, proficiency in perception, dexterity +2. Their particular variant of elf is actually charisma +1, which is lovely. And then we get rapier, short sword, and hand crossbow proficiencies, which I would say is very useful, because these are based on dexterity, which we have dexterity +2. Superior dark vision, so we can see up to 80 feet, so even at long range, our attacks aren't going to have disadvantage. And we get Fey Ancestry as well. And we get a spell. We get Dancing Light. Then at level 3, we get Fairy Fire, lovely support spell. And at level 5, we get Darkness. I haven't found that to be as useful, but it's still nice to have the spell as an extra option. Fairy Fire is based off, well, all the spells are based off charisma, but only Fairy Fire actually has a saving throw. So, what sort of classes are we looking at here? So, if we're going dexterity based, Barbarian, Fighter, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue. One downside here with Rogue though is the dexterity is great, but Rogues give us Rapier, Short Sword, and Hand Crossbow proficiency. It's kind of a bit of a waste in terms of looking at these proficiencies, this overlap. Anyway, we can go with Sorcerer as well, and Warlock. Loads and loads of options. What I really like especially is this hand crossbow proficiency, because at the moment, in patch 9, you can dual wield hand crossbows and your offhand hand crossbow attack. Its damage includes a dexterity bonus. So if your dexterity, I've got it at 17 at the moment, that's just the default. My offhand attack gets 1d6 +3. And often with sorcerers and wizards, well, the wizard is not going to work here, is it? But often with sorcerers, your bonus action isn't going to be used that often. And you can just, poof, get an extra attack. I love it. Humans, often seen as a bit boring and a bit weak mechanically, if you read things online and you believe it. One positive thing they've got for them though, is they can be any class. You can put any stat up to 16. One thing to keep in mind though, is they don't have dark vision. Not many of the classes don't have dark vision, this is one of them. But, there's one thing unique to humans because of their stat spread. I'm not saying I do this very often. You can get 3 16s at character creation. No other race can do that. No other race. Also, you don't have to go that far. 16, 14, 14. And can actually have 3 14s. So if you're going for a class that has a large stat spread, do you know, Paladins would be a great example. We can do really, really well. Obviously, Paladin would put Charisma up to here. So, I mean, the maximum is going to be 16. They can't get to 17. Sometimes you might want to get your attacking stat up to 17, so with an ability score improvement, you can actually put up that stat and another one, or you can pick a feat that gives a +1 in that stat and get something else as well. Don't overlook this. This is a very strong start, having a 16 and 3 14s and 2 10s, so no penalties to any stats. Githyanki have got a lot going for them. So we get intelligence +1, so we're looking for a wizard there. Strength +2, so we're looking at barbs, fighters, paladins, and a strength ranger perhaps. But one of 2 races that give light armor and medium armor proficiency. And also we do get some proficiencies in weapons. We get short sword, long sword, and great sword. Quite nice having great swords. It's a martial weapon that's 2-handed, so you can give this. Like you have a wizard, for example, where you've got medium armor proficiency and wielding a great sword. Why not? And we've also got mage hands, cantrip at character creation. At level 3 we've got jump, and level 5 you get misty step, which are lovely spells, great mobility spells, especially on martial classes. And it doesn't say it here, but we come to the skill tab. We actually get 1 extra skill, and any skill we want. Because we got the ones with skills with proficiency come from the fact they're a ranger, and we get some from the background. And Githyanki get an extra skill, whatever they want, whatever you want. It's really, really versatile, I would say. And if you're looking for like a non-conventional build where you're playing a spellcasting class, actually Githyanki are really, really good because of these extra armor proficiencies, which isn't just about your armor class. It can also be about being able to put on a helmet, put on gauntlets, and some boots, some of which are medium armor. It's not just about having a high armor class. Dwarves, Gold Dwarf. So, all dwarves get Dwarven Resilience, so advantage on saving throws against poison, and resistance to poison damage. And poison damage does happen a fair bit. Enemies do like to shoot out poison arrows. Constitution +2, awesome. Helps us increase our hit points. And then proficiency in Battle Axe, Hand Axe, Light Hammer, and Warhammer. It's a bit disappointing here that we get proficiency in these weapons, but we don't get the strength to go with it, because these weapons really do depend on strength for their attack rolls. We get Dark Vision, cool stuff. I forgot to say, Githyanki don't get Dark Vision. It's one kind of big downside to Githyanki. Anyway, back to Dwarves. So Gold Dwarves get an extra hit point per level. Amazing. Unfortunately, all Dwarves have a slow movement speed of 25 feet, and Wisdom +1. What does this mean for our classes? Well, I said the Constitution +2 is nice. You know, who doesn't want to have higher Constitution saving throws and hit points? But it doesn't help us attack. We get Wisdom +1, so we're looking at Clerics and Druids. That's kind of what we're looking at for the good synergies. Because we're not going to be able to get Strength, or Dexterity, or Charisma, or Intelligence up to 16 at the beginning. We're only going to be able to get Wisdom up to 16, or Constitution, but no class has Constitution as an attacking stat. Then on to Shield Dwarfs. So we've got the same race features here, but we've got Strength +2 and Armor proficiencies. So we're now with a Strength +2, which is pretty cool. We get Barbarians, Fighters, Paladins, Rangers if you're a Strength Ranger. And these proficiencies, a bit like the Githyanki, open up non-conventional builds, where perhaps you want to have a caster who has Armor proficiency from the beginning, but you will have to bear in mind that your casting stat won't be at 16 at character creation. And we get Strength +2. It's kind of cool. One of the few races that get a bonus of 4 stats, 4 abilities, like +4, if you do 2 +2. Most only get +3. Half-elves. Half-elves, a bit like humans, are kind of very versatile. Not in that we get as many bonuses to stats, but you get to choose which abilities you put +1 in. So we get Charisma +2 to begin with, and Dark Vision and Fey Ancestry. So yeah, we can be any class. Half-elves are so strong. So if I want to be a wizard, I put Intelligence +1 and probably either Dexterity, probably Constitution. And I get to pick an extra cantrip. What I said about high elves earlier for their choice of cantrips applies here. It's the same choice. I can also be a wood half-elf. They get the extra movement speed, amazing, and proficiency in stealth. You know, then I can be a paladin and go for... We've already got Charisma +2, Constitution and Strength. And I get to move faster. Or it can be a Drow half-elf. Now, for the Drow half-elves, they only really get the racial spells. We don't get any of the weapon proficiencies. But yeah, you can be any class. So I can be, I don't know, be a barbarian. If I'm going to be a barbarian, what I'm going to do, probably Strength +1 and either Constitution or Dexterity +1. They work especially well with the Charisma-based classes. So Bards, Paladins, Sorcerers and Warlocks, because, especially something like a Bard and a Warlock or Sorcerer, you've got Charisma +2 for your casting stat, and then Dexterity and Constitution to help you stay alive. Pretty cool. Halflings, before I forget, Halflings are another race that do not get Dark Vision. There's only 3 races, Humans, Githyanki, and Halflings, that don't get Dark Vision. They're lucky, so if you roll a 1 for an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, you can re-roll the die, and you must use the new roll. Now, we don't see this in the ability check screen outside of combat, so it's hard to say if it's actually working there. But in combat, you can see it says re-roll. And you don't really see it happening. It is behind the scenes, so it might seem like Lucky's not really doing very much, but it is mostly happening. If you open up the combat log, you can see it says reroll. We get Brave, so advantage on saving throws against being frightened. Comes up sometimes, it's not that important to be honest. Dexterity +2, brilliant. That opens up a fair number of classes. And the Lightfoot Halfling in particular gets Charisma +1, awesome, and proficiency in stealth, that's alright. All Halflings, a bit like Dwarfs, have a movement speed of 25 feet though. So for the Lightfoot Halfling, we're looking at, if we're Dexterity based, Barbarians, Fighters, Paladins, Bards, Rangers, Rogues, Sorcerers and Warlocks. A great spread of classes that they synergize well with, because there are lots of classes that use Dexterity and Charisma. The only real downside is, no Dark Vision and a low movement speed. And Strongheart Halfling, kind of suffering a bit from the same thing that happened to Dwarves, but not as much because we've got Dexterity +2. Right, so sub-race traits, we get advantage on saving throws against poison and resistance to poison damage, and Constitution +1. So the Constitution +1 is nice, but the Dexterity means that, well, I say only compared to the Lightfoot Halfling, which is the same race. Barbarians, Fighters and Paladins if you're Dexterity based, and then Rangers and Rogues, that's it, compared to the Lightfoot Halfling, which also had all the Charisma classes kind of opened up to them. And lastly, and not least, onto Gnomes. So their racial speed is 25 feet, again, a bit slow. Intelligence +2, that's good for wizards. But that's kind of it. Gnome Cunning. Now this cannot be downplayed. Advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. So even if you're playing a class that doesn't have proficiency in these saving throws, and even in fact if your ability scores in those abilities is quite low, you do at least, at the very least, have advantage. And so very, very beneficial, especially for the wisdom saving throws. Anyway, so the Forest Gnome also gets dexterity +1. Cool. Dark vision, nice. All of the gnomes actually get dark vision. And then we get speak with animals once per long rest, but it lasts until long rest, which is pretty good. I would say that if you're really, really into this and you want to speak with animals and it's kind of a big thing for you, you can get it other ways. There are some classes that can cast it. You can get, I think importantly, potions of animal speaking, which you can get from Volo. Take one, it lasts all day, so you don't have to feel forced to pick the Forest Gnome. But it is nice to have speak with animals. So Forest Gnomes, we have Barbs, Fighters, Paladins, if we're going dexterity based, as I'm kind of often been saying. Rangers and Rogues for the dexterity here, and Wizards. So they've got a bit of a spread. Deep Gnomes, kind of very similar to the Forest Gnome in terms of stats, so we're going to have the same classes. But we get superior dark vision, it's up to 80 feet, is very useful in the Underdark. An advantage on stealth checks, and got to remember, this is advantage, so this can stack with proficiency if you get it from a class or background, and also your dexterity bonus to proficiency, to stealth. And so you can get really, really good at being stealthy. You can get massive bonuses, especially if you're like a bard or rogue, to get expertise in stealth, and you use the smuggler's ring, and you've got advantage. You just can't be seen, pretty much. You could use Pass Without Trace for an extra +10. It's absolutely insane. And so yeah, we are looking at the same as Forest Gnome. Barb, Fighter, Paladin if you're dexterity based, Rangers, Rogues, and Wizards. And very lastly, we come to Rock Gnomes, and a little bit least, actually. So we've got the same thing that Gnomes have. Gnome Cunning is always going to be good, so it's not that bad. We get Constitution +1. This really limits the synergy and overlap with the stats with Wizards. That's it. Then we get Dark Vision, cool. In Artificer's Lore, so what, we get Expertise in History. That's not that great. If we compare it to Deep Gnome, like if I'm going to pick a gnome for a wizard, I'm just going to pick a Deep Gnome, or maybe Forest Gnome, because the Deep Gnome just has, I personally think, better sub-race traits. So let me know your favourite class and race combination, alright, because there's lots of different choices. If you want me to make a tier list out of this, I could, if enough people say they want me to, but I do want this to be more of a guide than actually comparing the races too much. A big thank you to all the members of my channel, and to you who've made it this far, to all of you viewers and lurkers, even if you don't leave comments, thank you very much. If you made it this far, please do consider subscribing, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.